I think it's very important to understand your strengths and weaknesses. And anyone who says you haven't got any weaknesses is lying. It's as simple as that. Everyone has a weakness. And if you haven't, then you're not looking hard enough.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today, we're speaking with one of the UK's most well-respected entrepreneurs who bootstrapped his way to becoming a self-made multi-millionaire. Becoming an entrepreneur and achieving millionaire status isn't easy at all. Most people believe they need venture capital or crowdfunding to launch a business. But our guest today did just the opposite and turned a £500 bank overdraft into a personal net worth of over £300 million in less than 10 years. I was keen to understand the key steps in his journey and how he made this all happen. So to reveal the secrets of how his bootstrap company became the #1 market leader in the segment, how he overcame the setbacks along the way, and what advice he can give to those who want to follow in his footsteps. So please welcome Mr. Oliver Cookson, founder of Myprotein, to the Escape Your Limits podcast. So Oliver, thank you very much for joining us today from Monaco. I was expecting to see a bit of the background, but
you wouldn't see me then, Matthew. So
no, that's right. As I was interviewing like the $300 million man or £300 million man, I thought I'd rent a nice apartment. So this isn't this isn't where I live, but I thought I'd kind of try and dress to impress.
It's a nice ceiling, yeah.
So look, Oliver, firstly I want to say I've read about you and I've got some friends that kind of know of you, and I have to say, congratulations. Being in a business similar to yourself as a startup, I know how difficult it is, and so just being able to achieve what you've done, I think that's fantastic. But I do have a question about you obviously sort of going through your journey. What was this sort of first biggest purchase that you did when you sold the company?
You know what? This is a key question. I don't think I had one, to be honest. Honestly, even when I sold Myprotein in the first stake in 2011, and when I sold when the whole group floated, I didn't go out and splurge straight away. I don't know. Maybe I should.
So what was that like? The first day, you'd obviously sort of put a lot of your heart and soul into it for a long time. How did that feel? Was it everything that you sort of ever imagined it to be, or was it was it something different?
Yeah, it was completely different. It was coming. It was something that wasn't unexpected, so I sort of built myself up to it. But
right.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't like everyone thinks it's like just a moment that comes and it's wow, amazing. But to be honest, there's as much sadness as there was happiness, because it was my life for 8 years, and I put my sweat, blood and tears, as you say, into it. So there's a bit of a void in my life when I first sold the business. Of course, I was happy that I had a waterfall event and I secured my family's future. But there was definitely a bit of a tinge with sadness, because I did give away what was my first child, I think, effectively.
Mm. And have you found sort of, I know you obviously sort of stayed involved in the Hut Group, I believe, who purchased them, but what's retirement like? Is it, have you been able to sort of find something else to keep you occupied, or?
Yeah, to be honest, nothing ever gets as, when you start, you think there's going to be loads of free time. You can go on a golf course, you can do X, Y, and Z, but you always seem to fill the time up with something. So yeah, I'm busy doing charitable events. I'm busy doing building my investment structures and so forth.
Have you found that you're the sort of person? I know some of my friends have been in a similar position, and they just really have a problem if they're not extremely busy. Are you one of those sorts of people where it's good for you to always have something to do, like from a mental perspective?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm exactly the same. If I have free time, I find it difficult to relax. I fill the time with either a hobby or something, a business or something charitable. I always fill my time, and I'm not one to be sat around watching the grass grow, as you say. I'm certainly very proactive in that sense.
So going to when you started the company, I'm just sort of interested in these sort of founders' journeys and the moments that led up to that. So when you sort of set upon this idea, what were some of the things that went into your mind, and how specific did you get with that vision? Because you came up with a very smart business. It was an online business, which was the timing was pretty good. You know, there wasn't, you know, a huge amount of big brands, I suppose, doing what you'd done. And also it was quite clever. You know, you could have gone into a number of different products, but having a repeatable business model where, you know, once you've got people on, you can sort of obviously continue to sell them, as opposed to a product-based company where there's nothing on the back end. So how was that sort of deliberate? You know, were you very sort of strategic in terms of saying this is what I need, or was it by accident?
I'd love to say it's all deliberate, but I'd be lying. So I think it's 50-50. I think with any business, you start with a blank piece of paper, but I think as you evolve, I think you have to pivot as you see the opportunities arise. I know that's a bit of a buzzword now, but you have to move and move with the times effectively. So when I started Myprotein in 2004, there was no social media. So we really started on the bulletin boards, V-Bulletin. And then obviously we had to pivot into social media marketing later down the track. As an example, in terms of the product mix, the repeat purchase or the consumable angle was very much the key element. I wanted that repeat customer. So I was a sports nutrition user myself. So I knew every 4 to 6 weeks, I'd always rebuy from the leading brand at the time. So that was a very important part of the business model for me. Then the other key thing that I did at the start, which was unique at the time, was vertical integration. So I wanted to manufacture the products and then sell the products. I wanted to control the supply chain effectively. So could control the margin, make product releases really fast. I could come up with products, and I did do in the morning, and have it on the website by the afternoon. And literally, it was unbeatable to stay ahead of that. If a company was selling it to retail, they would effectively maybe take 3 months to come up with an idea and then launch your products, to go through all the SKU process and the retail distribution channels. So that was one of the key things that helped drive Myprotein's growth, was that innovation.
Right. I know you well from what I've read anyway. You left school like me with 1 GSE. I don't even think it was a GSE at the time. But your sort of business acumen in terms of, you know, thinking through exactly what a good business should be, you know, takes people years, or they go to business school. Where did you get that from? Was that again just instinctual, or, you know, just being smart at observing things?
I think it's a mixture. I had a few businesses before that were smaller, but they certainly shaped me as a businessman. I believe everything happens for a reason within reason. And I feel those businesses really did help give me exposure to the online and just general business acumen, as you say. So yeah, but I think I'm a quick learner. I learn pragmatically. So if you give me a job, I will. If you tell me something, I probably won't learn it quickly. But if I do it, then I learn quickly. Right. So I made lots of mistakes on the way. So obviously I made more right decisions than wrong, but overall I learned on the job.
What's your view on learning and education, like being sort of, you know, obviously it wasn't an ambition of yours to go to university, as an example. So how do you, but you also, you know, obviously a very smart guy. What's your view on sort of education, continuing education?
Yeah, look, I think there's two sides to the coin. Is my opinion, and then there's the other opinion. So I think if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, I think you have to have an element of education involved, because you wouldn't want someone learning on the job who's doing a heart surgery or something. But then on the flip side, for me, I don't learn academically. It's just something that goes in one ear and out the other. I don't know if that's the same for yourself, but as you said, I left school at 16 with 1 GCSE, and I went to college, but I only lasted 2 weeks because the IT teacher in college, I went in at the lowest grade when there's 2 classes. It was the lower and the upper. And I said, look, I know, I'm not cocky, but I said, I know everything that you're telling me in this. Can I be moved to the upper class? They said, no. I said, okay, I'm going to leave. So, yeah, look, sometimes maybe I cut my nose off to spite my face when I was 16. But in terms of education, I think it's important. But I think this should be an evolution of education now. I think we should more vocational education, where people learn more on the job. I know the work experience is that, but it's very 2 weeks in the UK currently. I think there's a lot of reform needed for the curriculum. I personally am not interested in religious education. I'm not, you know, or maybe arts wasn't something that was really important to me. So maybe there should be something to learn about more economics, you know, learn more about how to pay the bills, how to maybe even on nutrition. So what's cholesterol, what's saturated fats, obesity, or more of these things that are more important in 2021, I think. For me personally, I don't want to offend anyone with that.
No, I wouldn't disagree. For me, I had a conversation with someone just the other day about it, and my experience of school was that it was just about, if you were good at memorizing stuff, you would do pretty well. And I had a terrible memory, so whenever I got to an exam, I just couldn't. I went blank, so I didn't do
exactly.
very well.
No, I'm the same. It seems like we've got the same behavioural patterns in terms of learning. But yeah, I'm the same. My memory's not too clever, and it's getting worse now. 25 years on.
So you went, when you started, you decided to go it alone. You didn't have any partners, which again is not an easy thing to do, particularly for anyone that's been in business will realize that. How did you complement your strengths, and what was one of your most important from a strategic perspective? What was one of your most important key hires that you brought on in those early days?
So yeah, I'm an only child, for what it's worth. So I was brought up in a single parent family. So it was just me and my mum. So I was very much used to being on my own. I love my own company, and I guess I'm used to that, really. So going alone in business was what I knew. Well, it was the only thing I knew. And my friends and my family, they weren't really into business. So I didn't have anyone to lean on in that sense. So I think I had no choice, to be honest. So look, it might have been better if I would have had a partner who had complemented my weaknesses, as you said, and maybe we could have grown the business quicker. But hindsight's a wonderful tool. But in the end, I kept 100% equity, so everything's got its pluses and minuses. In terms of the key hire, I probably should say my mum, who was number one hire. So she was working 15 years as a secretary in Manchester, and then she came to help me after 1 year or 9 months, and she was like the chief blender. So she did all the operational stuff, and then it freed me up to do more of the forward facing, because I was doing all the blending and whatnot at the start. But that's probably the most important hire. But then I guess I won't like to pick anyone out specifically, but there's senior management team. So I made 4 or 5 director hires when I was grooming the business for sale, and they all elevated the business in different areas. So operations, marketing, finance, and B2B sales. So they all did everything that I did a little bit better. And then that was a really strong team. In fact, 3 of the directors went on to found a company called the Protein Works. I don't know if you know them. So it shows that the team was solid, and it was great, and they went on to achieve greater things in terms of equity.
Right. And what would you say were your strengths out of that? Out of your business, and did you go on to sort of continue to develop your strengths within the team, or did you, like you mentioned, just sort of take a different step in the business and develop people with those skills that you were particularly strong at?
Yeah. So my strengths are, I think it's very important to understand your strengths and weaknesses. And anyone who says you haven't got any weaknesses is lying. It's as simple as that. Everyone has a weakness. And if you haven't, then you're not looking hard enough. But then on the flip side, you should be able to recognize what strengths you have as well. So I had a bit of a cold towel moment, and I looked at myself, thought, right, what are you good at, Oliver? What are you bad at? And I sort of already knew it, to be fair. I come from an IT background as a web developer so I taught myself to make websites from an early age. And so I'm very technical, but then I've got the unique twist of I'm quite creative in marketing. So I'd say they're my 2 strengths. 3. I'd say technical, marketing, and then new product development, innovation. So one of the things I believe I'm strong at is trend spotting, which is, if you look at the way the commercial market's moving, I can usually create a solution for the market and the consumer which works. That's one of my strengths, I guess. So that was really emphasized with a lot of the innovation we did in Myprotein, like the referral scheme, price matcher, just lots of the products. But then on the flip side, my weaknesses is accounts. I'm useless at accounts. I know it a lot better now, 10 years on. But back then, give me a balance sheet, I wouldn't know which way to look. And I guess I have a few other weaknesses as well, but that's the key strength. In terms of moving on, in terms of how I had to evolve as a person. So one of the key things in 2009, when I brought a corporate finance company in to sell a business, they said, Oliver, this is an amazing business. We're making a couple of £1 million and turning over I think we were only about 10 million then, but obviously the EBITDA was huge, percentage wise. And then they said to me, okay, there's one problem in your business. It's too dependent on you. If you get run over by a bus tomorrow, the business dies. I went, fair point, you're probably right, because it was more middle management at that stage. So they said, okay, we'll come in, we'll groom the business, we'll bring in the staff, and then we'll sell it for you. And I thought, they said, you can't do it. And that was like a red rag to a bull. So I said, okay, see you later. I'll give myself 1 year to professionalize the business. And then if I can't do it or don't do it right, then I'll come back to you. But in that year, we covered every process in the business. We started from literally operations through to the orders going out the door. And we had a complete manual this big on every process. We brought in the directors. So effectively, if I got run over by the proverbial bus, then the business would operate, and not just operate, but move forwards without me.
Right.
So I did myself out of a job basically.
And you mentioned the finance part. You know, it's similar to me. I'm in a family business. Fortunately, they've got a great team around me on that side of things. But now being on your own, having 100% of the business, and then having a couple of sort of successful sales and going forward, where did you sort of get that? Where did you get that sort of expertise in terms of guiding you about how to make some really clever financial and astute business moves?
So do you refer to the first exit and then the IPO?
Yeah.
So the first exit, I don't want to just say me after you said it was astute, but I guess the analogy that I always use was, and with hindsight, was it astute? I don't know. Maybe I could have done better, should have sold later, or I don't know. But the analogy I used was a one-arm bandit machine, a fruit machine. So I felt I was pulling the handle, and it was, you're getting your jackpot was going higher and higher and higher. And effectively, if something went tragically wrong in the business, which I know sounds quite fearful, but if something went tragically wrong in the business, then I'd lose all my money. So what my initial plan was to do is just take a minority stake of the cash off the table. So maybe sell 30 or 40% of the business. That was the plan when I went to sell, not to sell it all. So I guess it's just common sense. I obviously accumulated a huge amount of money where I was 7 years before. It'd be sensible to take some off the table, roll the dice, and go for the second bite of the cherry. It transpired I didn't go down the PE route, private equity route, because there's a story there, but I didn't go down that road and ended up selling 100% to the Hook Group. But absolutely key for that deal was that I did it as a 50-50 deal. So I got half cash, which was nearly 40 million, and then I got half in shares from the Hook Group, because I believed in Myprotein massively. I always knew it was going to be number one in the world. The trajectory was there. It was number one in Europe when I sold it. And I knew I thought the Hut were going to execute the blueprint right, and they did. And Matthew, the CEO, founder of the Hut, he was super strong, and I completely had faith that he would drive the business forwards. The wider business, not just the Myprotein.
Yeah. Now you, from as the story goes, you started the business with 500 quid. What did you spend the 500 quid on, if that was actually correct?
Yeah, no, it's correct.
Money.
It's not a lot of money. It's in my book, if we can give it a plug. My book, Bootstrap Your Life, is out in August. So there's lots of these things I touch upon, but I'll go deeper in these, because all these questions actually are on the money. This is pretty much chapter and verse. So yeah, it was £500. It's not just a marketing number. As I described in the book, effectively I went to get a loan, but I got refused by a bank. Then it was actually an overdraft. I think it was £250 my overdraft, and they extended it to 500. So the first amount of money was spent on product and the unit. It's like a room. It's like a 200 square foot room, if that. It was just like a lock-up garage, if effectively. So yeah, it was a combination. So there's another story in there, which is called the Andy story in the book. Effectively, to buy a pallet of whey, it comes in 20 kilo sacks, and it's usually 20 sacks. It's what's my maths then? 800 kilos. But at the time, raw whey 80% was £3 a kilo. So obviously, I didn't have enough money to buy a pallet, and no one would sell me just 1 or 2 sacks, because that's all I had enough money for. I think I bought a couple, and I rang around lots of dairies and distributors, and they all just basically said no. Well, there's one guy called Andy, R.I.P. Andy. He's unfortunately not with us anymore. But he heard something in my voice, and he thought, I'll give you a go, Oliver. We don't sell split pallets normally. I'll sell you 2 sacks. And he gave me that opportunity. So there's a good message in there, which is something I try and rely on. I can't help everyone, but I always try and give something back where I can. But obviously, it's impossible to do it for everyone. Before I get lots of emails asking for business help. But yeah, so I bought 2 sacks from him, sold them, bought 4, sold them, bought 8, blah blah blah. I don't think it was exactly those numbers, but in the end, a couple of years later, we're buying hundreds of tons from him a year. And I think still to this day, they're still a supplier, one of the suppliers for Myprotein.
Fantastic. So you didn't go down on the, a lot of businesses in this world, particularly to build the brands at the rate you've done, will go out and borrow money or sell parts of the company to get the cash in to sort of have that sort of type of growth that you had. If you was to do it differently now, what's your views on sort of getting investment or venture funding or anything like that? Would you still do it like the way you did? Are any pros and cons of the 2 different ways?
So obviously bootstrapping is a bit of the thing I've coined. Obviously my podcast is called Bootstrap Your Life. The book's called that. I didn't mean to bootstrap Myprotein, if I'm honest. It was just the only way I knew. I didn't really know that you could get an angel investor or venture capitalist, or it was just foreign to me. As I say, it wasn't something I was ever surrounded in. My friends, my family wasn't there. I just thought I'd create a website, build a website from scratch, put it online, and see what happens. And then it just went from there. So obviously the business was a cash cow, and it still is today. It's a highly, you get the money day one and then you send the products. So in terms of leveraging the business and bootstrapping today, I think it'd be so much harder to do it in the online space, because you could make a website the same as Myprotein pretty quickly. So I think someone who's fully funded will then obviously take over, because it just swamp you from marketing. I managed to stay under the radar for many years, and by the time we were above the radar, we already had critical mass. So it's a different, 2004 was a different world to today. So I'm not sure, it'd be very difficult to do. I think it'd be near impossible to launch a sports nutrition brand bootstrapped. I think if you're in a very competitive market, then I think you need to get funding in some way. I just think giving equity away right at the start is a cheap, you give it away too cheap for me personally. So I think entrepreneurs should be careful. I think a lot of entrepreneurs these days also celebrate getting a funding round rather than making money, which is a bit alien to me. I think you should always have your bottom right-hand corner and growth and have a strong profit line, and you can never go wrong. Also, when you get VCs early in, they control a lot of the provisions. They'll control your business, and they might stop you being as flexible and pivoting and doing what you want to do. And I wanted to stay in control, and that was very important. So these are factors that I'm happy I didn't do it, but I can see why some people would go down that path, and also can give you the exposure to they might be able to mentor and help. Maybe I should have done that. Maybe if we had done that, it would have been an even bigger business. Who knows? But it worked.
And in terms of cash flow, like were you able to because you scaled pretty quickly without having really any money? Were you able to do that because of the type of business it was, where you were just getting your cash in straight away and you could continue to put that back into product?
That's exactly it. It's a cash cow. So we got the money obviously pretty much plus 2 days after the sale, and then we just spun it out, and there's a massive profit margin. I think it's 80% profit margin in those early days. It was huge. Some of the amino acids like glutamine and creatine and obviously BCAAs, all the aminos, you maybe even in triple digit margins back in those days. It was really, there's a lot of margin in there. Even whey protein was £3 a kilo, and we were selling it for like 10. So obviously there's some cost, and the overheads were minimal because it was just me. And there's a £300 a month or £200 a month units, and there's no other costs other than minimal costs for hosting and whatnot. So it's spitting off cash.
Sounds like a good business to find another one of those nowadays.
I know. I don't know if I'm sure there is.
So I was reading up about the Hut Group, and what an impressive business, and they seem to have this magic touch, and you probably know better than anyone, but buying distressed or bankrupt businesses, or even successful ones like yours, and just adding some, the special sauce that transforms what they're doing. What's the secret to success in an online business, and how has that changed from when you started to probably the businesses that they would acquire today?
So I think the Hook Group are obviously, they've got some really talented people, and what they do very well is they drive they trade a business very well. So they can put a business within their infrastructure, which is obviously huge customer reach now, and then they can trade that very well via the different channels and whatnot. So I think that's the secret sauce. I think it's the reach. In terms of when I sold Myprotein to the Hut, to be fair, Myprotein was probably bigger than the Hut on once. It wasn't at the time, because the numbers that I got given at the time didn't actually transpire to be true. They were actually inflated slightly. So Myprotein was making nearly 6 million EBITDA. The Hut was making minus 1 million. The Hut Group was selling CDs online, and we were a leading online brand. So on reflection, we were probably a lot bigger business, and that's probably why Myprotein still to this day is the biggest attributed to the profit of the Hut Group of all the other departments put together than Myprotein. So it is the jewel in the crown, and it is still the profit-centric area. However, what the Hut Group have got, which they've done amazingly well, which I've got absolutely zero or anything to do with, is ingenuity, which is effectively selling their framework to health and beauty businesses. So like Ocado do for supermarkets and Amazon do for online commerce, they're doing for the health and beauty industry. And if that takes off, then the Hut Group's going to fly. It really is.
Is that really like an investment into the sort of technology infrastructure and then the customer base, and looking at, once they've developed that technical capability, putting other brands to those similar customers using similar marketing tools? Is that in essence kind of what?
Exactly, yeah. It's like a turnkey solution for the health and beauty industry. So effectively, someone like, just throwing names out here, this isn't a true fact, someone like Louis Vuitton or something, like a real high-end prestigious brand, then they would go to the Hut Group, for example, and say, we want to sell our products. Will you manage the website, do the marketing, translations, operations, blah, blah, blah. And someone like a high design brand like that, or even a skincare range, they don't really want to be getting involved in the nitty gritty of websites. They probably couldn't do it justice as well. So the Hut Group would take it all off them and then add it into their platform and just do the whole process from start to finish, which is, it's a real untapped area, because the health and beauty industry is obviously growing as a consumable product. So people come back every month or so. So it's a really clever move by the guys at the Hut for that.
And how do you see like a lot of brands in health, fitness and beauty now? Because the traditional model would be that, and even to be honest, in your business previously, you would go to a retailer like a Tesco or a Walmart, and they would have their margin and you would sell to them wholesale. Do you see that this direct to consumer model now across all industry, is that where it's going to go? And how do you think that sort of, how does the traditional retailers play into that mix, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's already there. So I think the vertical integration and the direct to consumer model was sort of crystallized when Nespresso did it. And I think that was the real, the sharp bit when Nespresso launched their direct to consumer shops, and they did the online model. So people like Tesco's or Walmart, they were asking Nespresso to sell their products, but they said, no, we're going to control the supply chain, control the margin. And I think from that point there, obviously Nespresso is part of Nestle. I think from that part there, it shows how powerful that brand is in the direct consumer model. So I think it's already there. But having said that, Amazon are now sort of switching it up. They're sort of going back to the high street. And I don't think you can argue with Amazon. So they're obviously moving into beauty salons now. Obviously, they've got the Amazon Go stores, which is the contactless convenience stores. They've got the organic, Planet Organic. So they're going back the other way. So I think there's an opportunity in the high street. I don't know what exactly it is, but there's something. If you can make the experience more customized, I think there's something there. I think they're just the shelves, and I think that's sort of done. But I think there's definitely an opportunity if someone can add a bit of a twist, like Amazon are with the health and beauty, where they're personalizing what the haircut looks like, adding tech to the bricks and mortar, I think there's definitely an opportunity there.
And it seems to me like a big part of, and you mentioned it earlier, a big part of if you're going to direct to consumer as a startup, that the brand building is the big part, which is why people would go through. I'll use Tesco's as an example because a lot of people know those, or Walmart in America. But that's obviously a great way to get your brand out there without necessarily paying for it. What are the, if you was to set up your own direct to consumer thing, what would be the biggest challenges? Is it marketing, and what would you what would you need to do to be able to sort of get that mass consumer awareness today?
Yeah, it's obviously a different world, as I said. I think marketing is the challenge now. It's the holy grail for any online business. I think you can set up an e-commerce store on Shopify or similar, pretty easily without much tech exposure. If not, you can pay a low cost to get a web store. But what you can't do is get that exposure, because you can have the best website in the world without people knowing what the URL is or knowing what the USPs or what the reasons for them to type the URL in is. No one's going to come to it. So absolutely, marketing is the holy grail. Social media marketing obviously proved super successful for people like Gymshark. But again, is that going to be a hard nut to crack now? Using the influencers, it's become expensive and it's very saturated unless you get a really unique space, but then someone will copycat straight away. So I think it's very difficult to launch a business in this market. But there is ways of doing it, because back when I started Myprotein, no one heard of referral marketing. So where you got a win-win, where you give the referral card and they got points back and they got 5% off their order. No one did that before us. Marketing on the forums was something that was very powerful for us back then, but now it wouldn't work. Pay-per-click was very powerful. So I think our cost per acquisition, our cost per acquisition per order for whey protein, for example, was £2.34. And that's not including brand, which dilutes the cost. So it's £2.34 because that was one of the areas that I focused on. I did the whole PPC campaign, the SEO, blah, blah, blah. But for now, £2.34 for acquisition, if you did the same now, it would be over £25. So obviously the margins have come down on whey. The cost of per acquisition has gone times by 10. So one of my rules of thumb is if you can't pay for the marketing costs in the first order, it's probably not a good channel to go down before you start burning cash. So obviously we were acquiring at £2.34, and then we were probably making maybe an average order was £43. Probably gross margin was nearly 50%. So we were making more than enough to cover that first order. Yeah. But now, if you're spending £25 on the acquisition, then you're going to be losing on the first orders.
Yeah. So if you were to do it, if suddenly everything went wrong and your value that you had was wiped off and you had to go back and bootstrap your business again, what would where would your go-to marketing place be? What would you, assuming that you wanted you seem as though this direct-to-consumer model is something that you know a lot about. What would be your model? Would you still choose that? And secondly, what would be your go-to marketing sort of strategy or tactics to sort of get your brand out there?
Yeah, well, hopefully that never happens, and because I'm not sure I've got the energy as I had when I was 23. It was relentless, as you touched upon. Starting a business is hard, but when you're doing it just yourself as well. I was spinning all those plates. I honestly don't know if I could do it again. So yeah, I'm sure. Well, this is the thing. I don't need to now. But if I was in a position where I was then, where I didn't have any money and I was living, from hand to mouth, effectively, from paycheck to paycheck, then maybe that'll change my mentality. So in terms of what I would do today, obviously I'd research. I'd probably come up with a better plan than I'm on the spot now. But what I would probably do is social is there's still a lot of scope there. So between pay-per-click and social, they're really my absolute go-tos. The key thing is the business would have a USP and have something unique to shout about. Because if you're just going to start selling protein powder online again, then it's just going to get lost in the noise on any channel, but certainly on social media. But if I launched a product which was unique and it had some strong selling points, I call them SSP, strong selling points, and also a key thing, it has USP, at least one USP. So then it'd stand above the crowd. So when you're actually marketing this on a channel like social media, people would it wouldn't get lost in the noise. People would see it and they'd actually drive towards it. So I think people say it's finished social media marketing, but I think if you've got the right proposition, it's still a channel to go to for sure.
And is that, like, obviously the organic, particularly if you're starting, and probably a lot of people who are listening to this, reassessing what they do with their careers after the pandemic. But if you, the organic reach is tough if you're starting it from scratch. Are you would that be more on a paid side? So you create some great content and pay for it, or do you think there's still space for organic from your perspective?
I think yeah, organic's tough because obviously Instagram's algorithm kills off organic to a certain extent. However, I think there's opportunities for contra marketing. So again, it's tough. But again, if there's a product or a service that you can offer an influencer, which they'd be interested in, it's not just, I don't know, whey protein powdered or one of all the other, I don't know, gym apparel, which is, highly done now. But if it's something completely unique, which makes their area stand up as well, I think it works on that side as well. So you could give them the product, which is, oh yeah, I want that product. I've not got one of those. Don't have that often. Then they'll market it to their customers. And then I think that gets a snowball effect going, and then organic starts to come into play. But absolutely key is having that unique proposition. And look, it's hard to find something unique in this market today, but it could be unique in a different way. It could be unique to the area you're in. It could be unique on a price point. It could be unique on a brand. It could be unique on a tone of voice. There's lots of different angles, and we can go out and make it unique. So don't think, oh God, if I'm not reinventing the wheel here, I've not got something. You have, because I think you struggle to find something completely unique these days. Always, a trodden path is the path to go down, but evolution is key. It's not a revolution, it's evolution. So find something you think can add value to do, or do it a little bit better, and then evolve it and make it sound a better proposition and add that value, basically.
And are there any platforms that you see, like there's obviously a ton of new social media platforms out there, and some I've not even got my head around, but are there any that you think it's like, obviously Google, you say pay-per-click is still a very solid one. Is there any other ones that you particularly favor, like YouTube or Facebook or anything, or is that very much dependent on the product?
Yeah, so like Google is very much, you need to know what you're searching for. So if there's an educational piece that's required, it's quite tough. But obviously with me, people search sports nutrition or sports supplements or protein powders or whey protein or creatine monohydrate. They knew what they wanted and just went straight in. So I had the captive audience already, because the retail companies like Maxi Muscle and Reflex and all these different companies, they sort of educated the customer, and then the customer came online, they typed in that. So but if you came up with a unique product, then no one would know what to search for. So I think you've got the educational piece. So this is where social media comes into play. YouTube's super powerful. Long form video is the place to be, I think. On Instagram now, long form video on IGTV has a lot more reach than the post or even short form video on the stories. So I think that's a real opportunity for social media marketing, that long form video, which can obviously flip onto YouTube as well. It's a lot harder to produce, so that's the thing. But that's a good thing. It creates quality. It makes people think a little bit more about it. I guess like this interview could be, I don't know if it's going on to YouTube or not, but it's a long form video. Then obviously there's the long form audio social media platform, which I forgot the name for now. The talking one, like the radio show.
Clubhouse, is it?
Yeah, Clubhouse. I think there's opportunities on there. I think that's an interesting. I've had lots of requests to do interviews on there. I've not done any yet because I've not actually installed the app, but it's something I need to do. But I think because it's quite a new and it's fast growing and it's got a bit of buzz around it, I think if you can get a channel on there and you can sort of own a space, I think in the future you could really spin that off and use it to leverage. So maybe if you've got an idea for a product now and you're not launching for a year, maybe go on Clubhouse, maybe start a channel, start educating people around the subject. And then in a year when your product drops, you've got a user base, you've got a following, then you can drop it in. And then you've already got a sales force effectively you've got 500 people, 1,000 people, whatever's following you, they can spin the message around.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that education is a real difficult thing. If it's not something that's going to be typed into Google or even an Amazon, so people don't know what they don't know. And I think that education piece, if you can figure that out, is it's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. So I think if you can tell people without them knowing what your product's going to do to help them without telling them the products to start. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you're running a business and you're quite stressed and you may be a bit anxious and all of these things that happen when you're an entrepreneur, and there's no shame in that, then maybe you could start some education around that in terms of, I'm not using things in this situation to profiteer, but it's an example, maybe a bad one, but someone who's in a stressed position, and then you could sort of tell people how to manage those and coping mechanisms to help. Well, then later on down the track, you can actually add a nutrition line or a vitamins line, which is tailored to those sorts of conditions, more mental health or just general well-being. So maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe start with education these days and then follow it on with the commercial solution.
Yeah. So in terms of your product development, you seem to have a bit of a knack of understanding what the market wants and then creating a product for it. What were some of the, I guess, what were some of the key lessons that you learned from that, and what were the challenges of? Because I guess, like you said about the whey situation, if you had this great supplement that probably some of the bigger companies were doing that you felt you would need it, I suppose there's going to be some sort of MOQs on a smaller company, particularly with no history on that particular line. So what do you learn in terms of product development, and how did you deal with being a sort of small startup trying to get, I guess, ingredients or products from companies that probably don't normally sell in such small quantities?
Yeah, so product development, as I said, was a huge, one of the massive pillars that helped funnel the growth, channel the growth. So I guess there's a few different reasons for that. One was I used to say in the board meetings, create as many landing pads as you can. So what I meant by that was, if you create a new product, create a variation on that product, create a new flavor, it's really easy to do, but it creates a new SKU and it creates a new landing pad, a new page in the World Wide Web. And that actually back then was really powerful. So in terms of the product innovation side, I guess just think outside the box and always ask the what or if or why questions. Don't just take what's already there as that has to be the gospel. Go outside the box. That's where the good stuff happens, and really challenge the status quo of the company. So when I started Myprotein, no one ever heard of, what's one example for, I went to a food ingredients exhibition it was mainly focused on caterers and large food manufacturers. So I went to that in Paris in about 2005, 2006. And I saw a stand which had this, like a 25 kilo vat of liquid egg whites, which was sold to companies who made meringues and things, like big catering companies. I spoke to them and I thought, okay, so tell me about this product. So it was pasteurized. It was so therefore the avidin content. So if you drink raw eggs, then obviously, well, not obviously, but avidin is it basically stops the protein being absorbed as an enzyme. So your body doesn't absorb the protein. So when you have to cook an egg to get the benefits of the egg white, also obviously high risk for salmonella, etc., etc. So pasteurizing it, but not cooking it, they had it in a certain area of temperature, actually got rid of the avidin, and it made it safe from salmonella. So I said, okay, it's highly bioavailable. Egg whites are super bioavailable. It's easy to drink. It tastes okay. I was a little bit gloopy, but it tasted okay. So I said, if you can get this into a 1 litre bottle, which is safe to send by post, so I have plastic, then I will sell this by the bucket load. And it took about 6 to 12 months to do that. And it was a massive seller for us. But no one would even thought of that within sports nutrition. As again, a low GI source of carbohydrates was oat powder, but it wasn't soluble. Oats isn't soluble. But what we did is we milled it, so it's super fine. So it made it a bit gritty. But we were the first to really do that in any way. So again, just challenge the status quo, ask what, if, why. And if you believe in something like that, if you believe it's going to work, I was an avid gym goer at the time. I used sports nutrition. I thought this product would work. I would prefer to drink a meal replacement or a weight gainer or a recovery shake we've got oats in it rather than maltodextrin or dextrose or fructose or any other high GI carbs. And yeah, it worked. So really challenge the status quo. And in terms of the MOQ points, I think because we were buying the raw materials, we could actually get a lot of the amino acids we bought from a UK distributor. So we could buy the drums in 25 kilos at the start. So the MOQs was sensible. I think where we did find challenge was protein bars, but we're much later down the track, so it wasn't an issue. And well, actually, we started protein bars. We used to get them from Egypt at one point, strangely enough. We had 50,000 bars seized by the customs because it had honey content in. They added honey at some point, and you can't import honey from Egypt. It was a very a mistake, which cost me a lot of money. But so in terms of the MOQs, the one other area was capsules and pills. So to do a decent size run-on pill machine or a capsule making machine, you need to be doing, high 6-7 digit number.
Was it important to be aware of staying focused? Because I guess within your category, you started with protein as an example, but there's so many ways, like you've already mentioned, like the pills, the bars, and there's probably so many other areas that you can move into. Did you have to consciously stay focused, or were you just look, if it's innovative, if it will get more people onto the platform, then nothing's off the table?
Yeah, the latter for sure. Nothing's off the table as long as it's relevant to the customer. I think when we started with protein, carbs, and I think shortly after amino acids. So it was like a sack of maltodextrin and dextrose, and then clothing came on in about 2007, 2008. It was an area we should have probably pushed more, but we did have a clothing line, as Jim Sharp showed, and Myprotein's clothing line now is it's a high revenue line. But yeah, anything that was relevant really to the customer. I think we even started to touch upon skincare and such like towards the end. I'm not sure if we actually launched at that stage, but we certainly were looking into that as being an area of focus. Myvitamins.com, which is a successful business now, was something that we developed before. So what we were trying to do is split off the brands, because we didn't want to make it. So someone who maybe in the 60 plus maybe wouldn't come to myprotein.com to buy glucosamine tablets for their arthritis. So that's why I wanted to split the brands off and made my vitamins. So we were conscious of that. And we were looking to split off in different areas as well, because I think it can be a bit overwhelming as well. Do you want to don't want to lose your core focus customers? If you're going to go really outside the box, then I think you might need to consider a sub brand of some form.
What about sort of setbacks? Painful lessons, you could call it failure or whatever, but what was probably one of the more memorable and painful lessons that you learned through this business?
There was lots of moments when, look, people say to me, every day isn't, success isn't like this. It's like a roller coaster. There was lots and lots of dark days, days where you just literally put your head in your hands or headbutt the wall effectively. And, I think anyone who's in that situation now, just once you close your eyes and go to sleep, it might be difficult to sleep. You get your head's buzzing if you're anything like me. But when you wake up, it's a new day. And, I think you just always got to just challenge the day as it is and forget the day before. Because I had lots of challenges through the time. So there's numerous. We got blackmailed by a supplier where they basically pulled our whey supply. So we then had no whey for a period of time. We had to really, because we're buying tons of it, hundreds of tons of it, not hundreds of tons, but buying tens of tons of whey at the time. And we had to import it from America because there's a bit of a funny situation, politics going on. We couldn't buy it from Europe. I won't name who they were, but effectively they said we will sell us the business for very, really small amounts, or we're going to stop supplying. I'm not sure that's legal, to be fair, but I told them where to go, and we did it, and we ended up Myprotein is a lot bigger business than now, and that's just a bit of for me. I think it's good to be fair in business. You got to be ruthless in certain situations, but you should never be like that. Always shoot straight and don't try and rip people off. But you got to look out for your own interests. But I think that's a key thing. I think karma comes around in some situations.
Yeah, you talked about like going to sleep and waking up in a new day, and I know it's not talked a lot about in business, and particularly guys especially. But I know many people. I have a good network of business owners, and they the negative thoughts and and the stuff that goes through your mind can be pretty tough at times, and it can go on for periods in some cases. How do you deal when you've got when you've got stuff, and like, it must be tough for you because you're also on your own for a lot of it. How do you deal when you have that sort of negativity in your mind? How do you manage it, and do you have any kind of rituals that you use to sort of snap yourself back into the right state?
Yeah, I do. I think, as you say, it's not talked about, and I think it is an important topic. And I did a podcast on mental health. I think it's something we should shout about more in entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs it's a lonely place. It's a lonely place. If you're on your own and you're doing it, it's very lonely. But even in a partnership, it's very lonely. There's nothing wrong with feeling like crap or having all these negative thoughts. You need to talk to someone, and everyone's been there. And entrepreneurs are twice as more likely to have a mental health disorder. So it's something that should be shouted about more. In terms of me, luckily I've got quite a strong fortitude of mindset. I believe it's a lot from when I was younger. I was very driven, very focused. I didn't have much when I was being grown up. I had loads of love from my mum, but we didn't have all the materialistic things. We didn't have central heating. We didn't have electricity in the meters. We used to pay on a card. So I just used to think to myself, I want more. Well, I've seen my kids in the latest trainers or games consoles, Super Nintendos as it was. I want a little bit more when I'm older. And I think that really gave me a solid fortitude of mind. So I was lucky that I had that, because I would have crumbled, a year in. But what I did learn was coping mechanisms. So I think because I was developing the website as well, I think that was highly technical, and I was getting stressed with customer phone calls and then purchase orders and all the different facets of the business. And it swamps you sometimes. So what I learned to do, not early enough, but I learned to set a timer on my phone, or just set a timer on your watch, 30 minutes. When you feel that oppressive feeling where basically the cortisol is kicking off, you go into Neanderthal mode. So it's proven when you go into that state, it's fight or flight. Basically, it's something from many years ago when we were cavemen. Effectively, when you go into that state of stress, you're very good physically, but you're not mentally. So you switch up. So what you need to do, you need to get out of that state, because it's not healthy for anyone to have cortisol running at a high level for a long time. So what I did was set a time for 30 minutes and then did a different task, a completely different task. So if I was getting stressed with a mental task, then I'd go and do a physical task. If I was getting stressed with a physical task, I'd do something mental and try and switch it up. And then typically before 30 minutes was up, you become, when I do something, I get quite absorbed. So the alarm on my phone or my watch or whatever would ping. And then I'd go, go back to that problem. And typically you'd get the problem fixed nearly right away. You've just got to turn your brain off and turn it back on again. And that's a good way of forcing that hand. I'm sure you can do it with meditation and do it all different ways, but that's the way it worked for me. And in terms of, and the other thing is fear. One of the key things that I always say is, fear is a liar. It's just a thought in your voice. It's not actually what you are. So when you have that fearful thought of what if this happens, or what if I do this, or should this person do X or Y, then just to recognize that it's not actually, if we sat here and worried about all the different permutations of what life can throw up, is a bomb going to blow up here, or is my building going to fall down, or I'm going to get run over tomorrow? Be here worrying about all these things that are not even really relevant. Just focus on what you can deal with and what you in control with. So recognize it's just a fearful thought, acknowledge it, it's normal, and let it go. It's something that's maybe simplified, but it's something that if you can train your brain to work in that way, it really does create a lot of bandwidth for all the good stuff to happen, rather than worrying 50% of it on all what ifs. So yeah, so it was very important to me to build that framework really when I was building the business, because it was there's a lot of stuff going on.
How important was health in terms of fitness and nutrition when you were sort of like in the thick of it? And what were some of the key things from a fitness and nutrition perspective that helped you perform at your best when you were driving that business forward?
Look, I can't profess to be the best. With hindsight, the best investment, one of the questions people have asked before is, what's the best investment you've ever made? People will usually say Myprotein with a £500 overdraft, or shares in a Hook Group, which obviously floated for a decent number. But the best investment I ever made was the gym, my first gym membership when I was 16 or 17. David Lloyd's in Cheadle. I was one of the first 500 members. Never been in a gym in my life. It was the best investment I made because it gave me regimented. I was going down a path that I probably shouldn't have done at that age. I was becoming a bit loose, and that gave me the focus and the regiment to really get myself in order. And I really did. I was a bodybuilder, not a competing one, but for 5 days a week, I was training like a bodybuilder. I was eating food like a bodybuilder. On the weekends, it all went out the window. I'm a social guy, enjoyed going out. But through the week, that was very much my life. So I trained hard, I supplemented well, but I can't profess to having an amazing diet back then, or it's probably too heavy in protein. I probably trained too heavy weights. My form wasn't good. I didn't use core exercises. There's so much I do differently now because, core is what you should train first, I think now. And I'm suffering through it now because I've got a disc issue now. So yeah, I can't give anyone advice of what I would do because I didn't do it right myself.
I've read that you've said where you talked about balance, and now obviously you probably got you can make those decisions yourself. But when you're building the business, what was a typical day and week look like in terms of when did you start, when did you finish, and when did you, if get much time to sort of for yourself and to take some time off?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. So I had a full-time job when I started in Myprotein as a web developer. So I actually woke up about 5. I'm not one of the 5 a.m. club members. I work best at night time. But I had to wake up at 5 because I needed to get there about 6 to start packing the powders for a few hours to get into the office for 9. So I went to the unit to pack the powders, and I went to my full-time job from 9 till 5, 9 till 6. Went home, had something to eat. Typically then went to the gym, which was a key thing that I did. Came back, and about 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, then I started on my second job, which was developing a website, doing purchase orders, customer inquiries, MPD, and that would roll on 12, 1, 2, 3. And it was unsustainable. I couldn't do it in my 40s, but I was burning that hard. So I didn't have any time through the week. Most weekends were very just Myprotein laden, but I always saw my friends at least once a week. That was a key stress reliever for me. I used to go out and blow the hair down and have a blowout, basically.
And would you do that again now, like knowing, I suppose, and you're also at a different age as well, but would you, a lot of people say, you've got to grind and work around the clock to do it. Do you think having the wisdom that you've got now, is that a good thing in terms of, your thought process and making decisions? Is that essential, or is there would you do it in a different way?
Look, I wouldn't want to advocate that because it's, but I don't think there was any other way. There's no other way I could have built that business being on my own and doing everything and having a full-time job. There's literally not enough hours in a day. So if I didn't do that, I don't think the business would be where it is today. For me, if you want to create an amazing international brand, I think you've got to dedicate your life to it. I really do. Even today, maybe not as extreme as that, because maybe you wouldn't start and have a full-time job, but you certainly got to put like 14, 16 hour days. For me personally, I think you've got to be the hardest working person at the fore and really drive it and get under the skin of the business and understand it and be right at the forefront. Fingers got to be on the pulse. Look, many people won't agree with that, but that's, for me, if you want to create an amazing business, which is, you've got to put in the top level effort as well. I'm sure there's people who've done it without doing that, but for me, it's key.
Yeah, Oliver, before I ask the last question, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you've got a podcast and a book coming out. Could you share us a little bit about what you're doing and why you decided to start your podcast and write the book?
Yeah. So the podcast and the book are called Bootstrap Your Life, and the podcast is, I've done the first season. The second season is going to be coming in the next month or so. The first season is at the back end of last year, and it covers. It's quite short. I wanted short form or medium form audio. So what people do is the reason it came around is because I was getting lots of questions from people who were asking, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I'd say 80% of the questions were very similar. So I thought, okay, I'm replying to these. I'm getting too many now to reply to all of them personally. So what if I can answer one question and give it to many, a one-to-many relationship, like on a database? So I thought if I answer the question on a podcast and then lots of people listen to it, then it can hopefully help lots of people will answer. So that's what I did. So people write in, they give me a question and I answer the question. I usually go off on a few different tangents relevant to the question. And then that's the podcast effectively. It's called Bootstrap Your Life. Season 2's out in about the next few weeks, but season 1's out from last year. If you've not heard it, go and check it out. The book, I guess the book is from 1979 when I was born to 2011 when I sold Myprotein in the first instance to the Hook Group. And I guess the thing there's a couple of reasons really. I wanted to go through a self-reflection process, which I think is so important for anyone to do, even if you've not got what's known as a big story, as it were. Even if you just lived your life for 20 years, go through a self-reflection process and write a book, effectively a memoir. And it helps me a lot with in understanding myself a bit more, understanding how I can improve, setting myself new goals, new targets. So that was a key thing, and it works really well. I think a decade after selling Myprotein, I think if I would have done the book a year after, it wouldn't have been as powerful as it is now, because I'm a bit more mature, a bit more rounded. I can reflect on things. I've seen things, how things are. And I think the publishers love the idea. It's coming out on Little Brown, and they love the book. They're absolutely delighted with it. So I'm super happy because it's the first book, so it's a bit unsure. But also, I think what's important for me is the ancestral point, because I think we should all be proud of who stood behind us, who give us the Wi-Fi, who's the beautiful fruits we have on our tables, and everything we have today is by the people who stood behind us. So I think if we all try and do something powerful to help the people in front of us, our children, our children's children, then that's got to be a good thing for us all as mankind, as a human race. So that was another angle. I wanted someone in 100, 150 years maybe to maybe look up the family tree, see what hopefully I've created a legacy in Myprotein, I hope, then understand it a bit more. And I'd love to do that with my ancestors and understand them a little bit more. So that by doing that, I think I put a marker in the ground, a stake in the ground to future people, and hopefully inspire future generations, and hopefully inspire people now if they've got an idea.
And where will
the book is out? The book.
Yeah, where will you be selling it through?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the book is out in August this year, August 2021, and it's going to be on Amazon, all the usual high street retailers. It's going to be, I think they're going to be launched on in audio form as well, Audible. But I think due to COVID, it's probably not going to come out straight away on that, because I'm going to be narrating it myself, I think, for better for worse. But yeah, it's going to come out on paperback on Amazon first. But if you follow me on olivercookson.com or at Mr. Oliver Cookson on Instagram, you can sign up. The pre-orders should be live in a matter of weeks.
Excellent. And I'll put some notes on that in the various show notes and on the YouTube channel, etc. So final question then, Oliver. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make possible. Outside of what you've done with Myprotein, what would be another memorable example of you escaping your own personal limits?
Look, I sort of had the answer planned for this around Myprotein, so I better backtrack now. so on the spot, people don't believe me, but I'm an introvert and I'm a pretty shy guy. But maybe you can believe me. For me, from going from that introverted, shy person and being able to express myself, move country on my own, set up businesses, make friends in lots of different places, and believing in myself and really pushing myself through those social issues, not issues, but social, I guess more the solitude angles, and really better myself effectively. I guess that's probably, I would never have thought I'd be in this position now than I was, 25, 30 years ago. So I think it's believing in yourself and always trying to better yourself. And I believe that was impossible for the reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, excellent. Well, putting the price tag aside, which is impressive in itself, but just from what you've actually been able to achieve on your own, with very little around you, like I say, I really take my hat off. I'm going to look forward to the book. I'm sure there's some great lessons that I can learn from that, and I've learned a hell of a lot from this interview. So Oliver Cookson, thank you so much for joining us today on the Escape Your Limits podcast.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.